Well, Gabriel and Dara, it's so wonderful to have you a part of our Learn to Listen series. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
I know normally you would be in a different mode today, but with all that's going on around the world with this virus, I know it's affording us opportunities like this. So thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it greatly.
Of course.
Well, I would love for you to share a bit about just who you are, just your involvement in dance, where God has you currently as dance artists, and then we'll just jump into some questions.
Good. Want to start?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Gabriel Speiller. We're currently living in Fort Worth, Texas. Right now I dance with Bruce Wood Dance in Dallas, Texas, and I've been there for about 4 years now. I graduated from Belhaven University and went on to dance in New York for a while. I danced in Houston for a while, and I guess I kind of just been mainly focused on performing, and I have taken opportunities to choreograph with different companies that have asked me, or performing arts high schools, other universities, but my main focus has been in performance. So that's me.
And I'm Dara. I graduated from Belhaven in 2014, same year as Gabe. And then I came to Texas Ballet Theater in Fort Worth. I did their summer intensive, and then they asked me to stay on after that. And I'm now in my 6th season with the company. So really loving it there. It feels like home, and yeah, that's me.
That's so wonderful. And the love bug bit when you were back in university, and some time after that got married and have been navigating life as a married couple. It's not always so common that you have 2 dancers together that are spouses and are navigating this. So I know you'll have some nuggets to share in that area as well. But just jumping into our first question, as we're looking at just the value of knowing as believer artists how important it is for us to listen to the heart of God. Just would love for you all to share about that. How have you cultivated that discipline of listening to God speak?
Yeah, so sorry, I just have a couple notes that I'll be looking at so I can stay on target. So I was trying to really, I guess, like, one area for me was a little bit easier to understand than the other. So when I thought about like learning to listen, I felt like a lot of that happened like from my mistakes. When I'm not really hearing like God's voice in my life, or if I'm not really hearing what Dara is asking of me. But a lot of times, like from that mistake, like I can see like how I hurt Dara, or how I caused confusion in like our relationship, or how I'm confused by like maybe what I think God is or isn't telling me. And so I feel like in terms of like learning to listen, like it was easier for me to think of the listening to learn part. Like that for me was just easier to understand, because listening to learn just makes much more sense for me. Like I'm a very organized person. I have the same routine every morning. I like to think I'm pretty logical, and I complete like most of my tasks by following certain steps. So in order for me to like do these things and to accomplish these tasks, I am much more willing to listen to somebody and get that information to accomplish a task. So like for the physical and material things, it's a little bit easier, but when it comes to like the spiritual and emotional things, sometimes it's harder for me because I'm just too task oriented.
It's not as tangible. But I think for me, really learning to listen to like the Spirit's calling in my life has been much more like an act of faith for me, because I can listen all day long, and then it's choosing to step out in faith when I do feel like I have sought that guidance, and that I've been, in the Word and talking to friends whose opinions I trust and respect. And instead of me just getting stuck in my head and like, what does God want me to do? It's really easy to get paralyzed in that place of being so afraid to make the wrong decision, but just instead knowing that he is sovereign and has blessed my efforts to seek him. So I think that's been tough, especially when I was graduating from college and didn't have a job for sure that I knew of, and just felt so led to come here and had so much peace about it. And then it was like a 5-week audition basically of like, taking class, and just something I had to trust him with every single day. So I found that, just choosing to step out in faith and make those tough decisions sometimes is the best way that I can listen to what God is telling me to do. So
yeah, and I mean, even like physically, like with my body, like it's similar, because like when I get injured or exhausted, then like I figure out what I need to do so that I don't get to that point again. And so in the same case, I'm like listening to my body, and then I'm learning from that. And so I guess like physically for me, like that's like just like as soon as I start to hurt or I get dehydrated or I'm waking up and I'm just so exhausted every morning, like I'm like, okay, I'm not feeding myself or taking care of myself the way I should. And I'd like to try to correlate that to like, my spiritual life, or just to like how I interact with people on a daily basis. Like if I'm worn out, or like if we're feeling disconnected, then I'm like, okay, so where are we not being fed?
Listen to the red flags, or those little like notifications, I guess, that your body or your relationship send you, and just take a second to think about, okay, what does this mean? Where is there a deficiency, or an overexertion of something? And it's easy in this kind of career when we're really busy and you just kind of have to like go, and it's easy to kind of get lost in that. But I think being intentional with your time with yourself, and just like thinking and meditating, and I don't like to cut out my devotionals in the morning. That's a really good like time for me to kind of check in with myself. And yeah.
I love that part of the connection and correlation of listening to our bodies and understanding how there are so many different ways to listen to God. And sometimes it's, it's intuitive. It's just like this inkling of a thought or an idea. And we might just think, oh, that's my intelligence. I do also give recognition that that's God speaking, and that's his nudging, and that's the notification, that's the signal that's being sent. And so learning how we do that, to pay attention and delineate when is it just a good idea, and when is it God's idea, and when is it God's idea that is a good idea. And often, it's the case that God's idea is always a good idea. So I appreciate that. So you've alluded to, having busy schedules, and obviously being dancers, and the fatigue of, the physicality of what you're doing. You've cultivated opportunities to lead. I know that for both of you, and just opportunities that you've been given. And now, Dara, being with the company for a few years, I'm sure moving along in ranks, that you're not the newbie anymore. And so you have some opportunities to share and to lead out there. And then Gabriel as well, when you go and set work and choreography, you're stepping up into the leadership role. So what do you all feel are really positive qualities that you have gained yourself, or maybe you're still striving to achieve, but as far as leadership qualities that you value?
Yeah, so I think I'm still learning how to lead well, and probably will be forever, but I do know that like one thing that I really appreciate from like leaders that I've had is like, or directors, rehearsal directors, leaving like room for mistakes from those people that you're coaching. So when I'm in a room, if I feel like my director is giving me the freedom to try something, and if I make a mistake, rather than coming down on me right away for that mistake, instead of saying like, okay, that didn't work, let's try something different. That for me, I feel like I'm able to grow, and I'm way less shy, because dance is such a revealing art form where like you're putting your physical body in front of people, and you're also putting your emotional state, and so you're trying to give a lot of yourself. And so when you hear someone just say like, I don't like that, sometimes it's easy to hear that as like, I don't like you, or I don't like what you have to offer. So when I have someone in the room, and I would like to think that when I go to set work, I can kind of set a tone where like I do have an expectation, and there is like a certain kind of excellence that I'm looking for in the room, but I'm also okay with like, if you make a mistake, like it's okay to make mistakes in this space. So for me, that's kind of like the first one that comes to mind. And I don't know, I kind of have like a couple that we both kind of talked about, just like humility as as dancers.
I'm kind of learning the line between humility and like self-deprecation, and like knowing that those aren't one and the same. And just kind of like getting a little bit of a thicker skin, because like Gabe was saying, dance is so personal to us, and it's like part of our identity. So when you feel like somebody doesn't like that, it's very difficult not to take that personally. And so I think that you do need to have kind of like a quiet confidence that what you bring to the table is unique to you, and be able to take correction, and be humble with the way that you go about your work, but not let any comment from any person just like destroy that. So that's something that I'm working on, that I think will really help me be a better leader in the long term too, and just be aware of like how much I'm letting soak into me or affect me, because it's really easy to do in this career, it's a very, very personal thing to us. So yeah, that's one thing for me, especially.
Yeah. Also, I think it's really, I feel like some of my best directors or people that I've worked with are really good at meeting. And granted, it's different. Like my company has like 12 people in it. Dara's company has like 45. So obviously the way rehearsals are run are very different. And I'm in a contemporary modern company. Dara's in a ballet company. But at least for me, like when there's only 12 dancers in the room, it's great when you have a director or a boss who can kind of meet each person where they're at. Like they know that dancer well enough, or that person well enough, that they know how to get the best work out of them. Some people you can be really hard on, and you can almost be like, what, are you kidding me? That's not your best work. Like you could do better than that. And they'll like be like, all right, I'm going to do better. And some people, if you did that to them, they just get crushed, and they don't want to try anymore. So there's so many different approaches, especially because we're all just so different. So that's something that I think, like as a leader, like if you can meet each individual where they're at, and that doesn't mean that you're taking it easier on some than others, but you just know how to communicate differently.
Well, I think at the core of that really is like a certain level of empathy, and that's something that comes to me very naturally. It's just like I feel whatever other people are feeling, that can be like both a blessing and a curse. So I think that part of being able to like meet people where they're at is to understand, what makes them the way they are, or what would best motivate them or encourage them. And when people do feel like they're cared about at a deeper level than just like, what do you bring for me? Then I think that it fosters a healthier environment with whatever leadership aspect we're dealing with. So
yeah. And I mean, I'm trying to think. I guess like the last one I feel like is really important is just like being patient as a leader. Just I think something we're both working on, and I think it's hard to, like, sometimes you go to a space and you have like, you have to get something accomplished in a certain amount of time. And it's really hard to be patient with those that, especially people that you don't like really connect with naturally. Like you're just like, I don't really understand like their energy. I don't understand the way that they process. But I feel like the moment that like you lose your patience and the ability to like stay positive in a room, like everyone can feel that. And so then people start to trust each other less, or they feel like they have to be more guarded, and they're not willing to like put their best self forward because they don't feel like, kind of going back, they don't feel like you have their back. They feel like they're going to mess up and then it's going to be the end. So Yeah, I mean, those are a couple things for sure.
Well, so much of what I'm hearing you talk about is the relational aspect, just your relationship to each other, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with God, and then the other people that you have an opportunity to engage with. And I think that's huge, in particular in such a embodied art form where we really are dealing with people. It's not like machines and, whatever, just computers or things that we don't need to have empathy for just because that computer is going to feel back. But I appreciate that so greatly. So as you're dancing in different areas and genres and companies with different focus, I'm just wondering about just what are you seeing happen in the dance world today? And in particular, just as far as faith goes or how God is moving in the arts, what are some of the things that you've seen either personally and also with some of the your friends in other companies, or I know you have international friends as well. Just I'd love to hear from you all about that.
Yeah. So we both have been involved in various degrees with different Christian companies or universities. I mean, like for myself, like I went to Palm Beach Atlantic University and then I transferred to Belhaven. So I had the opportunity to dance at like two of like the main Christian dance colleges in the US. And then I danced with Adeum. I've also like worked with people from Inlet and Ballet Mag and even like overseas with Christian companies there. And so I feel like I've had a good amount of exposure to Christian artists of all different types of companies all over the world. And like most recently, I've been working with Zion Dance Project here in Fort Worth, Dallas area. And I feel like I've seen like so much growth in terms of like just like excellent dance, and you can say the same thing because you've been around longer than I have, and you've seen dance from where you had to be in a tunic all the time to now you have people that can pretty much wear any costume they want and it's not necessarily frowned upon. But I've seen just like the quality of dancer grow so much, and that has been awesome. And then I've also seen in the secular dance world, like there are more Christians in the secular dance world now than like ever before. And that for me, I remember when I was in New York, I was so surprised because I had just graduated from Belhaven where everyone's, talking about God all the time. And I was like, oh man, I'm gonna be all alone. And I was the only Christian in the company that I joined in New York. And I kind of got connected with Awakening Dance Movement, which is a Christian dance project based out of New York. And from there, I got to meet different dancers from different secular companies. And I just thought like, wow, like there are way more of us than people realize. And I think that's great that God is like calling. I mean, we're both in secular dance companies now. And I think it's great that God has called us to do that. And like for myself, when I first joined Bruce Wood, one of our rehearsal directors is a Christian, but none of the dancers in the company were Christians. And so I was like, all right, I'm the only Christian again. That's fine. And then I've been there 4 years now. And slowly every year I've been there, we've had more Christians joining. So now we have 5 Christians in the company, which is almost 50% of the company is now Christian. And it was just me at the beginning. And so it's awesome for me to just see like God's goodness and like growing like wherever you are. And you can speak for like TBT.
Yeah, I mean, I think coming out of college when it was such a safe place to be like with your faith and dance and connecting those, I was a little nervous like going into my company, but there's actually like a lot of Christians there, and we have a Bible study and we meet every Friday night, and that has honestly been like the biggest blessing to me, especially in those first year or two of being here and feeling like, just it's a hard transition. And so having that community and that group here has been such a big blessing. They're some of our closest friends here in Fort Worth, and now actually some of the Bruce Wood dancers come to the TBT Bible study, and so we all have this like group together, and like half our prayer requests are about like injuries and body parts and like but it's just so special to have that support in that community. And I think that God really was watching out for me, or had a good, it was such a blessing. And
and those are some of our closest friends now. Like, I obviously don't dance with TBT, but I started going to the small group because Dara was there. And like, now the people that I hang out in Fort Worth, like when I want to hang out with people, like they're people from the Bible study. So
yeah. Well, then one of the girls, she has in my company in the Bible study, she has two sisters that dance at New York City Ballet, and they also have their own Bible study there. And so that's really cool to hear about. And like, her sisters come to our Bible study when they visit, and my friend goes to the New York City Ballet Bible study when she goes to visit. So it's really cool just to see how, we find each other and we support each other. And also having Vincent and Abigail here now with Zion has been really cool to just see how they're influencing like the whole dance community here in DFW. Like the first year that they had their summer intensive, it was like still really successful, but it was a lot smaller. And it's like,
we've doubled in numbers every summer. So I was involved in the first Zion dance project, and there was 20 to 25 dancers. And then the next summer it was like 50 dancers. And then last summer we had 80. And I mean, that was the point where we were kind of like, this is getting really crazy. And it was really like Vincent and Abigail, and they asked me to be their rehearsal director. And I was setting works for him and trying to clean, and you're trying to do like 12 works in like 2 weeks. And it's like totally bananas. But at the same time, like the dancing is really intense, and it's high quality dancing. Like there's amazing dancers from all over the country and even international now that are coming. But we also have sessions each day where they will like FaceTime someone in, whether it's like someone from Israel or different seminars, and they just talk about different aspects of our faith. So it's not all dance related, while a lot of it is trying to tie like who you are as a person, your faith, and then like your dance, and how do you take all three of these things and kind of make that like bigger and better. But yeah, I mean, that's a plug for Zion right there. Like they're obviously doing something right, that they're doubling every year. And now next summer, they're going to be in New York as well as Dallas. So,
good for them.
Yeah, good for them.
Yeah, there's a lot happening. And as you alluded to, being around as a Christian since 1981 and having had, danced for many years prior to then, things have evolved. And there's some things I just couldn't have imagined way back then, when I felt isolated in 1981 as a new Christian and as a dancer, that I just didn't know other Christian artists. And so now it's, I don't know that people necessarily take it for granted, but maybe partly they just don't realize the journey of how challenging it was when you did feel isolated or all alone. And obviously you all have felt that when you entered into the new arena in these companies. But you've just spoken so clearly of God's faithfulness. And I think that that's going to continue to happen. We're going to keep seeing more and more quality trained dancers who are going to be able to contend in the marketplace. And God wants glory. And so it's going to keep happening.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like different people, like you were talking being Christian in 1981, and like a lot of the older dancers that have kind of paved the way for us now, like they've taken people under their wing and they've kind of trained them on like how to do it right, how to do it well. And like, off the top of my head, like you and Steve Rooks and Bill Wade and Randall Flynn, like I remember I had only been dancing for like a year and a half, and Randy kind of like took me under his wing. And that's the reason I went to Belhaven, was because he was like, you should check out this school. I have a friend who's the chair there. And just kind of like taught, like, especially these guys, they really have a heart for like men in dance, and just like they want to see that grow. And not that is any more important than like women in dance at all. But it's just like a specific area that they were interested in. So yeah, I mean, and it's kind of crazy to think that like that could be us, and like that's definitely Vincent and Abigail right now, but like that could be us, like, in 30 years from now, people are like, oh yeah, Gabe like took me under his wing when I was a kid, so it's wild to think about that kind of stuff.
And I think it's our responsibility to think that way. You know, when we look at the scriptures, and in particular where it talks about the older women and being responsible to train the younger women in the philosophy and principle, you know, goes cross gender. So I think that that's part of the responsibility that we have, that we don't hold these truths, and we don't, we're not selfish about it. We continue to foster just the next generations and the, you know, the generations after that. And so I think just expect that to be a part of your journey. And I know it already has for both of you, just in who you are and how you've encouraged people. And it might be colleagues and peers, or some that have had opportunities to work with you. And God will continue to multiply that in the days and years ahead. So what else would you like to share? Anything else on your heart in particular related to just, you know, understanding what it means to be a leader, or understanding what it is to be in a relationship with God, and how we can keep encouraging and inspiring others?
Yes, definitely. Sorry. I mean, one thing that I think is super important, and it is being done, but I think it's good to just to say it again, that like our standard of like excellence as Christian artists should never be lower than that of like a secular artist. I think that a lot of people have worked really hard to make sure that like we can compete in the marketplace, you know, like a lot of time, like perfection obviously is not attainable. Like you can't be the perfect dancer, and it's not possible, and you'll destroy yourself by trying to be that. But it is important to like work with excellence each day. And I remember for a while, I thought like people would always say like, you want to be a consistent dancer. Like people want to hire dancers that are consistent. And I thought that was like, well, I have to always be on my leg. I have to always have like 100% of my energy all the time. And like, that's not what it was. And now I realize like when I'm thinking about being consistent, it's more about like my work ethic. It's more about like, there's going to be days where you're exhausted and you're tired and you have stuff going on at home, but it's important that like when you're in the room that you're still giving like your very best, because that's what God is calling us to. So that's like your work ethic is your consistency. If they can see that you're, you know, busting your butt every day in rehearsal, like people will notice that. And people will also notice if you come into rehearsal and you're just not trying because of other things. Like, and I mean, and it's sad because in a lot of secular dance companies, like most of them, I would say, like usually the directors, they don't care if you had a bad day. And they're, you know, it's like if you're not going to produce, then they're going to let you go. And so I just think it's really important. Yeah, just rewinding. I just think it's really important that like we, yes, encourage one another. And I think it's great that we're out in a lot of Christian environments. We're always complimenting each other and telling each other how beautiful we are as people and as dancers. But it's important to challenge one another and make sure that that standard of excellence like applies. And if anything, like we try to like surpass it.
Yeah,
you know?
I think something that Aaron Chen said to me or to the class in one of my modern classes at Belhaven was that grace isn't an excuse for us to be anything less than excellent. And just sometimes it's easy in like certain Christian dance environments to just, like you said, have those like, oh, it's okay, like God still loves you, and like you know, but I think he was just really, really encouraging us to, you know, if anything, we need to work harder. We need to, you know, represent that well, and that, you know, saying that God loves us no matter what isn't an excuse to be lazy. And I'm not saying that everyone's like that, but for me, that just really resonated because it can be easy to get complacent, especially like, you know, I've been with the company for 6 years, and I never want to stop improving, but there are times when it's like you're kind of burnt out or you just need a break, and it's easy to just like go into autopilot mode, but that isn't doing anything for me. And so it's really hard, but you have to be very, very self-motivated, because I'm even at a company that, you know, in our company classes, like we still get corrections, like they're still training us. There's a lot of, you know, a lot more feedback than like a typical ballet company. And so I'm really grateful for that. But it's so much less. And it's so much less though than even what we received at college, like all of that feedback and that one-on-one like attention and care and focus. And so I have a meeting like once a year with the staff about like how I'm doing, and it lasts maybe 4 minutes long. So I'm just really trying to learn, you know, how to be aware of what I need to work on, not just like showing up to work and, you know, trying to like, and trying to just like make it through the day, but trying to figure out how to keep myself motivated and energized and, you know, taking care of my body for sure. But it's you have to be very self-motivated. So still working on that.
Yeah. And I think another thing is just like be okay with being in an uncomfortable situation and even putting yourself there. Like for me, like I've always enjoyed choreographing, but I was like, I don't know if I'm a good choreographer. Like you don't know until you put your work out there. And that was something I was like, maybe I should explore. And I've just learned that like you have to be willing to put yourself in uncomfortable situations, whether it's like, okay, you have 4 days, you have 10 hours to make this like 10-minute piece, and you have like 2 hours a day to, you know, whatever, 2.5 hours a day to do it. And it's like so much pressure and it's not very comfortable, but like trusting that like God is like going to help you get through that. And like I try to, whenever I'm working, I try to do like 5 minutes of just like meditation and silence before I even walk into the building, just because like I know my thoughts can run wild. And so I just need a minute to be like, what thought, if I'm trying my best to not think of anything, and that's really hard for me, but if I'm trying to just be quiet before the Lord, like the thoughts that do cross my mind, maybe that's for a reason. Like maybe those thoughts are continually crossing my mind because those are things that God wants me to think about or bring before him. And so I find that when I put myself in these uncomfortable positions, like setting choreography really quickly, or maybe teaching a class to a group of company dancers that I'm like, wow, they're all better than me, and I'm teaching them class, you know, I'm always growing and learning from that. And I'm growing and learning how to be like a better leader, because I mean, we talk about like, oh, what are we going to do in the future? What are we going to do when we like retire from dance? And I don't know, you know, like, I'm like, I have no idea. Like I've thought about like, oh, should I get my MFA and looking to teach at a university? What if I went on staff with a company somewhere? And there are like so many possibilities. And it's just like a big unknown right now. So I have to be willing to like almost put like, or I guess like blind obedience to God. Because ultimately, like every time you're obedient with God, like you're going to get wiser and he's going to grant you more wisdom, but you won't gain any wisdom if you're not obeying and putting yourself out there. So
yeah.
Well, with that blind obedience, I mean, it's faith, right? You just have to have faith, just having to trust. And something you said, I heard something recently about the people in life who are uncomfortable when they start something, they can become more comfortable later on because you have proven and tried and failed and refined and all of those things that help you later to feel like you're more accomplished. It doesn't mean that we stop learning, but the people often who are more uncomfortable later on in their life, it's because they never went through the uncomfortable time early on. And so I just believe it's such a valuable lesson that you're articulating, the importance of making sure that we are focusing on being able to have these lessons that we're learning. So gosh, it's been wonderful to connect with you two and just to hear your stories. And we'll make sure that we get your connection as far as, social media and ways to connect with you. But just thank you so much for this time today. And I'm so proud of you, so proud of both of you and what you're doing. And I just pray God's blessings tremendously on all the continued work and where he has you in your life.
Well, thanks so much. Yeah, we love you. Thanks for having us on here and just having a conversation.
Absolutely. Love you too.
All righty.